Hi, this is Alex from Groovy Entertainment. Today we got another record to play for you. Today's record is The Ivory City in the Fairy Princess for 1977. So let's get started.
The Ivory City and its Fairy Princess. One day, a young prince was out practicing archery with the son of his father's chief advisor, when one of his arrows accidentally struck the wife of a merchant while she was walking about in an upper room of her house close by. The prince had aimed at a bird that was perched on the windowsill of that room, and hadn't the slightest idea that anyone was nearby, or he never would have shot in that direction. Consequently, not knowing what had happened, he and the advisor's son walked away, the advisor's son teasing him because he had missed the bird. A few hours after, the merchant went to ask his wife about something, and found her lying in the middle of her room, her eyes closed, and an arrow fixed in the ground within a foot of her head. Supposing she was dead, the merchant ran to the window and shrieked,
They have killed my wife! Oh, she was a good wife, too!
The neighbors quickly gathered, and the servants came running upstairs to see what was the matter. They examined the woman and discovered that she had only fainted, and that there was only a slight wound on her shoulder where the arrow had grazed. As soon as the woman opened her eyes, she told them that 2 young men had passed by the house with bows and arrows, and that one of them had aimed at her on purpose as she stood near the window. Well, when he heard this, the merchant went to the king and complained about what had taken place. His Majesty was enraged at such obvious wickedness, and swore that the most terrible punishment should be given on the offender if he could be discovered. He ordered the merchant to go back and find out whether his wife could recognize the young men if she saw them again. So the merchant asked her if she remembered what they looked like.
Oh, yes, dear husband. I should recognize them again among all the people in the city.
Well, when the king heard of this, he had an idea.
Good. Then tomorrow I will cause all the male inhabitants of this city to pass before your house, and your wife will stand at the window and watch for the man who did this wanton deed.
Yes.
A royal proclamation was issued, and the next day all the men and boys in the city from the age of 10 upwards assembled and marched past the house of the merchant. The king's son and the advisor's son had been excused from obeying this order, but they were curious and wandered by with the crowd just for fun. As soon as these 2 appeared in front of the merchant's window, they were recognized by the merchant's wife.
Oh, them! That's the ones! Ooh.
And this was immediately reported to the king.
What? My own son and the son of my chief advisor? What examples for the people! Let them both be executed. Chief advisor, you arrange it.
Please, your majesty, I beg you. Let us first investigate the facts in the case. Things are not always what they appear. Let me ask your son what happened. Young prince, tell me, why have you done this cruel thing?
I shot an arrow at a bird that was sitting on the sill of an open window in yonder house and missed. I guess the arrow struck the merchant's wife, for which I am truly sorry. Had I known that she or anybody had been near, I should not have shot in that direction.
When the king heard this, he calmed down slightly, but was still considerably upset.
We will discuss this later. Right now, I order that the people be dismissed. Their presence is no longer needed.
That evening, the king and his chief advisor had a long and earnest talk about their 2 sons. Although the king hardly wished this on them, he said that for the benefit of the nation they should both be executed. But the chief advisor suggested that the prince should be banished from the country instead. This alone would be enough of an example to the people about what happens to wrongdoers. The king agreed. So, on the following morning, a small company of soldiers escorted the prince out of the city. When they reached the last city building, the chief advisor's son overtook them. He had come as quickly as he could, bringing 4 bags of coins on 4 horses. Throwing his arms around the prince's neck, he hugged him and explained why he had come.
"Oh, my friend, I cannot let you go on alone. We have lived together, played together since we were children, and so we will be exiled together, and we will die together. If you care for me, let me go with you."
Oh, I am grateful for your presence. But consider, think what you are doing. All kinds of trouble may come to me in my exile. Why should you leave your home and country to be with me?
"Because you are my best friend, my very, very best friend, and I love you like a brother. I should never be happy knowing that I abandoned you in your hour of need. Oh, I want to go with you. I want to."
So the 2 friends walked along as fast as they could, and behind them marched soldiers and the horses with their valuable burdens. On reaching a place at the borders of the king's lands, the prince gave the soldiers some gold and ordered them to return. The soldiers took the money and left. They did not, however, go very far, but hid themselves in ditches and behind rocks and stones, and waited till they were quite sure that the prince did not intend to sneak back. On and on the exiles walked, till they arrived at a small village, where they decided to spend the night under one of the big trees of the place. The prince built a fire and arranged the few articles of bedding that they had with them, while the advisor's son went to the butcher and the baker and the fruit merchant to get some food for their dinner. For some reason, he was late in returning. Perhaps the bread was not quite ready, or the butcher was closed and he had to find another. After waiting an hour for his friend, the prince became impatient and got up and walked around. He saw a pretty, clear little brook running along not far from where they had camped, and hearing that its source was not far away, he started off to find it. The source was a beautiful lake, which at that time was covered with the magnificent lotus flower and other water plants. The prince sat down on the bank and, being thirsty, scooped up some of the water in his hand. Fortunately, he looked into his hand before drinking, and there, to his great surprise, he saw reflected, whole and clear, the image of a beautiful fairy. He looked around, hoping to see the reality, but seeing no person, he drank the water and put in his hand to scoop some more. Again he saw the reflection in the water that sat in his palm. He looked around again, and this time discovered a fairy sitting by the bank on the opposite side of the lake. When he saw her, he fell so madly in love with her that he dropped down in a faint. When the chief advisor's son returned and found the fire lighted, the horses securely tied, and the bags of coins lying all together in a heap, but no prince, he became worried. He waited a little while, and then shouted,
"Prince, Prince! Where are you, Prince? Come on. I know you're out there, Prince!"
But there was no reply. So he got up and went to the brook. There he came across the footprints of his friend. Seeing these, he went back at once for the money and horses, and bringing them with him, he tracked the prince to the lake, where he found him lying on his back as though he were dead. The prince's friend became very upset.
"Alas, alas, my brother, are you alive? Oh, do not die and leave me here. Speak, speak, I can't stand it."
And he poured a little water on the prince's hands and face and gently shook him. In a few minutes, the prince, revived by the water, opened his eyes and looked about wildly, as though he could not quite believe where he was.
"Oh, thank God you're awake. I thought you'd never open your eyes again. But what happened, my brother? My friend, what happened?"
Go away. I don't want to say a word to you or to see or anything. Go away.
"Oh, be serious. Come on. Let's leave this place. I don't like it. Oh, see, I brought some food for you, and horses and everything. I brought everything, but let's eat something and get out of here. Come on, let me help you up."
Go alone. Goodbye.
What? What has happened to you? That you suddenly don't care about me? A little while ago we were close friends, and now you hate the sight of me.
I have looked upon a fairy. Only a moment ago I saw her face. she noticed I was looking, she covered her face with lotus petals. Oh, how beautiful she was! While I gazed at her, she took from her bosom an ivory box and held it up to me. Then I fainted, and now I care for nothing except her. Oh, if you can get me that fairy for my wife, I will go anywhere with you.
Oh, brother, you have indeed seen a fairy, for I know her. She is a fairy of the fairies, a most exquisite creature. She is known as the Angulizar of the Ivory City. This I know from the signs she gave you. From her covering her face with lotus petals, I learn her name, and from her showing you the ivory box, I know where she lives. So be patient. Don't worry. I will somehow arrange your marriage with her.
When the prince heard his friend's encouraging words, he felt much comforted, got up and ate, and then went away cheerfully with his friend. On the way they met two men who belonged to a family of robbers. In this family there were 11 people. One, an elder sister, stayed at home and cooked the food, and the other 10, all brothers, went out, 2 and 2, and walked about the 4 different roads that ran through that part of the country, robbing those travelers who did not fight them, and inviting others, who were too powerful for 2 of them to manage, to come and rest at their house, where the whole family attacked them and stole their belongings. These thieves lived in a kind of tower which had several stone rooms in it, and under it was a huge pit where they threw the corpses of those they had killed. 2 robbers came forward and politely spoke with them, and begged them to come and stay at their house for the night.
Oh, travelers, it is late and the night is dark and cold. There is not another village within several miles. Come, stay with us and enjoy our hospitality. Should we accept this good man's invitation, brother?
The advisor's son frowned slightly to show his disapproval. He did not trust these men. But the prince was tired, and thinking it was only a whim of his friends, he said to the men,
Very well. It is most kind of you to ask us.
So all 4 of them went to the robber's house. Soon the prince and his friend found themselves imprisoned in a room, and they were very unhappy.
No use groaning. It doesn't help anything. Here, give me a boost up to this window, and I'll see if there's any way we can get out of here. Oh, yes, from here. I can see below. There's a ditch surrounded by a high wall. Here. Oh, I'm going to squeeze through this window. Oh, my head. Oh, I'll jump down now. I'll jump down and go and look around. You wait here. I'll remain quiet until I return.
After a while, he came back and told the prince that he had seen the most amazingly ugly woman, whom he supposed was the robber's housekeeper. She had agreed to release them on promise of her marriage with the prince. So the woman led the way out of the enclosed yard by a secret door. Soon, they were outside.
Oh, we're here now. We're here, but where are the horses and the bags?
You cannot bring them, and to leave by any other way would be asking for mortal trouble. You would both be killed in an instant,
said the ugly sister.
Oh, go out by this door as we go. See, I have a charm, and with it, I can make them thin or fat.
So the advisor's son got the horses without any person knowing it, and repeated the charm. Making the horses pass through the narrow doorway like pieces of cloth. So thin they were now. When they were all outside, he restored them to their former size. He at once mounted his horse and took hold of the halter of one of the other horses, and then called to the prince to do likewise. Then they both took off at a gallop, with the woman behind them. Now the robbers heard the galloping of the horses, and ran out and shot their arrows at the prince and his companions. and one of the arrows killed the woman, and so she was left behind. On and on they rode, until they reached a village where they stayed the night. The following morning, they were riding again, and on the road they asked for the location of Ivory City whenever they met a passerby who looked like he knew the area. After some hours, they came to this famous city and stayed in a little hut that belonged to an old woman from whom they feared no harm. At first, the old woman did not like the idea of these dusty travelers staying in her house, but the sight of a gold coin, which the prince dropped into the bottom of a cup, in which she had given water, and a present of another gold coin from the vizier's son, quickly made her change her mind.
Oh, yes, yes. Do stay. A few days at least. Love company, I do.
As soon as her housework was finished, the old woman came and sat down with her lodgers. The advisor's son pretended to be completely ignorant of the place and the people, and asked many questions.
Madam, tell me, what is the name of this city?
Ivory City. Don't you know that? Thought the name was known all over the world, and then some.
On the mention of the name Ivory City, the prince gave a small moan and then a deep sigh. And the advisor's son looked at him hard as if to say, keep quiet or he'll realize we're up to something.
Good lady, is there a king in this country?
Oh, of course there is, and a queen and a princess. The name of the princess is Hulizar, and the name of the queen...
But here the advisor's son interrupted the old woman by turning to shake the prince, who was staring about like a true madman. He pushed the prince off to their room, telling the old woman they were tired from their journey. Once they were in their room, he told the prince that they were indeed in the right country, and it was only a matter of time before they would be able to see the beautiful princess.
Oh, my goodness gracious.
The next morning, they noticed that the old woman was really fixing herself up. She had arranged her hair quite carefully and was wearing a new robe and shoes.
Are you expecting company?
No, I'm going to see my daughter, who is a servant of the Princess Gulizar. I see her and the princess every day. I should have gone yesterday if you had not been here and taken up so much of my time.
I'm sorry. But please, do me a favor. Be careful not to say anything about us at the palace. You understand. Don't describe us or anything like that, you know?
As you say, not a word about the both of you.
The advisor's son had asked not to talk about them at the palace, hoping that because she had been told not to do so, she would certainly mention their arrival, and so the princess would be informed of their coming. When the old woman arrived at the palace, her daughter was quite cross with her and asked why she had not come to visit when she said she was coming.
Because, my dearest, two young travelers, a prince and the son of some great advisor, have decided to stay in my hut, and they demand a lot of my time. Why, it's nothing but cooking and cleaning and cooking the whole day through. I don't understand men, never will. One of them appears to be especially stupid. He asked the name of this country and the name of the king. Now, where on earth are these two from that they do not know these things? But never mind, they are very great and very rich. They give me a gold coin each day and each night.
After this, the old woman went and repeated almost the same words to the princess, who listened carefully. When the princess heard all she had to say, she hit the old woman several times and promised her worse if she ever again spoke of the strangers in front of her. That night, when the old woman had returned to her home, she told the advisor's son how sorry she was that she could not help breaking her promise, and how the princess had hit her because she spoke of their arrival and all about them. The prince became full of despair.
Oh, wara. Oh, no. If she feels this way concerning words about me, what then will be her anger and loathing when she sees me? Anger and loathing? No. She will be very glad to see you. I know this, I know it. In this treatment of the old woman, I understand her request that you will go and see her during next week when the moon is slight in this
next time the old woman visited the palace, Gulizar called one of her servants and ordered her to rush into the room while she was talking to the old woman. And if the old woman asked what was the matter, she was to say that the king's elephants had gone mad and were running through the city and the bazaar in every direction and destroying everything in their path. The servant obeyed, and the old woman, fearing that the elephants might go and push over her hut and kill the prince and his companion, begged the princess to let her go. Now Gulizar had obtained a charmed swing that landed whoever sat in it at the place where they wished to be, no matter where that place was. She ordered a servant to bring the swing, and when it was brought, she asked the old woman to sit in it and wish that she were back in her hut. The old woman did this, and was at once carried through the air quickly and safely to her hut, where she found her two guests safe and sound.
Praise the Lord, you're all right. I thought that both of you would be killed by this time. The royal elephants have got loose and were running every which way. When I heard this, I was very concerned about you. So the princess gave me this charmed swing to come back in. But come, let's go outside before the elephants arrive and knock down the place.
Do not you believe in this, because it is just a joke. They have played a little trick on you, you know.
And the old woman thought this was true because, well, no elephants had come that way. And the advisor's son told the prince that the princess was signaling him and that soon they would meet. When the moon was most slight in the sky, the prince and the advisor's son seated themselves in the swing and wished themselves within the grounds of the palace. In an instant they were there, and there too was the person the prince desired to see, standing next to one of the palace gates and longing to see the prince every bit as much as he was longing to see her. What a happy meeting they had! Right then and there, the prince and Gulizar betrothed themselves to each other and considered themselves engaged to be married. Then they parted, the one going to the hut and the other to the palace, both of them feeling better than they ever had before. From that time on, the prince visited Gulizar every day and returned to the hut every night. One morning, Gulizar begged him to stay with her always. She was constantly worried that something might happen to him. Perhaps robbers might kill him, or sickness attack him, and she would see him no more. She could not bear to think of living without him. The prince explained that there was nothing to worry about and said that he ought to return to his hut at night because he had left his home and country and risked his life, all for him. And besides, if it hadn't been for his friends, he would never have met her. Gulizar agreed, but she was determined in her heart to get rid of the advisor's son as soon as possible. A few days after their conversation, she ordered one of her maids to make a fish stew. She gave special orders that a certain poison was to be mixed into it while cooking, and as soon as it was ready, the cover was to be placed on the saucepan so that the poisonous steam might not escape. When the stew was ready, she sent it at once with a servant to the advisor's son with this message: Gulizar, the princess, sends you a gift in the name of her dead uncle. When he received this gift, the advisor's son thought that the prince had praised him to the princess, and therefore she had remembered him with this present. So he sent back his thanks and gratitude. When it was dinner time, he took the saucepan of stew and went out to eat it by the stream. Taking off the lid, he tossed it aside on the grass and then washed his hands. During the minute or two that he was washing, the green grass under the lid of the saucepan turned quite yellow, and then black. He was astonished, and, deciding that there might be poison in the stew, he took a little and threw it to some crows that were hopping around. The moment the crows ate the stew, they fell down dead.
Praise the power that saved me, that preserved me from death once again. But I must speak to the prince. Could he have known of this?
That evening, when the prince returned from his palace visit, he noticed that the advisor's son was very quiet and sad. The prince put his hand on his friend's shoulder and said,
Oh, what is the matter? Are you lonely because I am away so much of the time and you have no other friends here?
So the advisor's son knew that the prince had nothing to do with sending the stew, and therefore told him what had happened.
Look at this. In this handkerchief is some stew that the princess sent me this morning, and it is terrible. It is full of poison. I was so fortunate to discover it in time.
Oh, my brother, who could have done this? For who could hate a man as fine as you?
I must tell you. It's the princess, Gulizar.
Oh, no.
Yes,
no,
listen.
No.
Listen to me. The next time you meet with her, I beg you to take some snow with you. Where you're going to find it around here, I don't know, but before seeing the princess, put a little of it into both of your eyes. It will make your eyes tear, and Gulizar will ask, why is it that you are weeping? Tell her that you weep for the loss of your friend who died suddenly this morning. And wait, take with you also this wine and this shovel. And when you have pretended intense grief at the death of your friend, ask the princess to drink a little of the wine. It is quite strong and will quickly put her in a deep sleep. And then, while she is snoozing, heat this little shovel and mark her back with it. She'll feel nothing, I assure you. Remember to bring back the shovel again, and also take her pearl necklace and bring that back with you too. I love pearls. Now don't be afraid to do as I say, because your happiness depends on these actions. I will arrange that your marriage with Gulizar will be accepted by her father, the king, and all the court shall approve as well.
The prince promised that he would do just as the advisor's son had told him, and he kept his promise. On the following night, after he had returned from his visit to the princess, he and the advisor's son, taking the horses and the bags of gold, went to the graveyard about a mile or so away. It was arranged that the advisor's son should pretend to be an Indian holy man, a fakir, and the prince should pretend to be the fakir's disciple and servant. In the morning, when the princess had awakened, she felt a smarting pain in her back and noticed that her pearl necklace had disappeared. She went at once and told the king of her lost necklace, but said nothing to him about the pain in her back. The king was very angry when he heard of the theft and had it announced throughout all the city and surrounding country. The advisor's son heard the announcement, which said there would be a handsome reward for anyone who discovered the person who stole the necklace. But he did not appear worried.
Oh, don't worry, my prince, but go and take this necklace and try to sell it at the bazaar.
So the prince agreed that this whole story was rather bizarre, but he took it to a goldsmith and asked if he would buy it. The goldsmith said that he would, but he had to go to get the money first. The prince waited and waited, till at last the goldsmith returned, and with him the police, who at once took the prince into custody on the charge of stealing the necklace. The police asked how he came into possession of the necklace.
Why, a fakir whose servant I am gave it to me to sell at the bazaar. And if you'll allow me, I'll show you where he is.
So the prince took the police to the place where he had left the advisor's son, and there they found the fakir with his eyes shut and engaged in prayer. After some time, when he had finished his devotions, the police asked him to explain how he had got the princess's necklace.
Oh, no, I don't wish to tell you. But if you call the king here, I will tell him face to face.
So some of the police went to the king and told him what the fakir had said. The king came at once, and seeing the fakir so serious and earnest in his devotions, he was afraid to arouse his anger in case his action should make heaven punish him. So the king placed his hands together in the attitude of one who asks advice from a holy man, and he asked the fakir,
How did you get my daughter's necklace?
Last night, we were sitting here by this tomb worshipping, when a ghoul, a ghoul, dressed as a princess, came and dug up a body that had been buried a few days before. On seeing this, I was filled with anger and hit her back with a shovel, which lay on the fire at the time. While running away from me, her necklace got loose and dropped to the ground. You wonder at these words, but I know I can prove them. Examine your daughter, and you will find the mark of the burn on her back. Go now, and if what I say is true, send the princess to me, and I will punish her. The king hurried back to the palace and at once ordered the princess's back to be examined.
Your Highness, I have examined the princess's back, as you commanded. And, Your Highness, it is so. The burn mark is there,
said the maidservant. The king became furious. His own daughter, a ghoul? I command the girl to be put to death. She must be a changeling. She's no daughter of mine. The princess at the time couldn't be reached. She was at a dance, changeling partners all night long. But his advisors argued with him and said that he should send his daughter to the fakir, as he had promised, and the fakir would decide what her punishment should be. The king agreed, and so the princess was taken to the graveyard. The fakir said at once what should be done with her. I know. You must let her be shut up in a cage and be kept near the grave that she desecrated. This was done, and in a little while the fakir and his disciple and the princess were left alone in the graveyard. Night had fallen by this time, and the fakir and his disciple threw off their disguise and, taking their horses and bags, appeared before the cage. They released the princess, rubbed some ointment over the burn on her back, and then set her upon one of their horses behind the prince. Away they rode, fast and far, and by morning they were able to rest and discuss their plans in safety. The advisor's son showed the princess some of the poisoned stew she had sent him and asked whether she had repented her action. Then the princess wept and confessed that she had been crazy with love and jealousy, and that now she realized that he was her greatest helper and friend. She said that he might kill her if he liked, for she was not worthy of the prince. But the prince and the advisor's son had disagreed, and explained that she had become bewitched by her own love spell which she had cast upon the prince long before at the lake. But now neither of them were under a spell. They were really and truly in love. Hooray! The princess was happy to be in love without the aid of any artificial spell, for it felt better that way, and she renounced her fairy powers that had got her into trouble. The advisor's son sent a letter to the king's chief advisor, his father, telling him of all that had happened to the prince and himself since they had left their country. When the advisor read his son's letter, he went and informed the king. The king was still angry. He caused a letter to be sent to the prince and his friend, in which he ordered them not to return, but to send a letter to Gulizar's father and inform him of everything. And the prince wrote the letter as the advisor's son had told him to. On reading the letter, Gulizar's father was much enraged with his advisors and other officials for not discovering the presence in his country of these important visitors. And as he was especially anxious to impress the prince and his friend, he ordered the execution of some of his advisors on a certain date. For Gulizar's father was a stupid man, and he thought the executions would impress the prince with his power and importance. The king wrote a letter back to the prince and invited him to stay at the palace, promising to arrange a marriage with Gulizar as soon as possible. The prince and the advisor's son most happily accepted the invitation and received a very fancy welcome. The marriage soon took place, and after a few weeks the king gave them presents of horses and camels and elephants and jewels and rich cloths, and told them to travel to their own country, for he was sure the king would now receive them. As part of their farewell celebrations, Gulizar's father had planned the execution of his advisors. But the prince and his friend pleaded for these men's lives, and the king listened to their pleas and restored the advisors to their former positions. The chief advisor of Gulizar's father was so grateful, for he had been one of the condemned, that he offered his daughter in marriage to the prince's companion. This daughter was quite beautiful, and she and the advisor's son fell immediately in love, and so they were married. Then the prince and his bride, and the advisor's son and his bride, accompanied by a troop of soldiers and their brides, and a large number of camels and elephants and horses carrying very much treasure, left for their own land. On their way they passed the tower of the robbers who had imprisoned them months before. With the help of the soldiers, they knocked it to the ground
chased off all the robbers, and took the treasure which they had there. After several days' journey, they reached their own country, and when the king saw his son's beautiful wife and all his treasures, he at once forgave him and ordered him to enter the city and live wherever he liked. From that day on, the prince met with no trouble and had much joy in his life. He became a favorite of the king, and in time succeeded to the throne. The advisor's son became his chief advisor, and together they ruled the country for many, many years in peace and in happiness.
So that was the Ivory City in the Fairy Princess from 1977. So if you like, subscribe, share, and comment. Have a groovy day when that'll be come out real soon.